everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with all of you and to share this information with you. This workshop was created to be a voice for students with learning disabilities. And its content and its title is intended to be a call to action for all of us who are associated with education. I learn differently, please teach me differently. Now, some of you may also be aware that these words are actually a quote. They are a quote from an educator, a Mr. Earl Oramus. And this wise man also shared this insight with us. If the experience is pleasurable, the learning will occur more easily. That should be on all of our templates for lesson plans, I think. And we target that guideline when at the Learning Disabilities Association of Sudbury when we develop workshops. And we hope today that you find this experiential workshop both clear and engaging, so that at the end of our time together, we all arrive at the same end place, an increase in understanding as well as appreciation of what it means to learn differently. So let's set the stage. Let's acknowledge that all of us in this room have a shared vision. We want all students to have positive, successful experiences throughout their academic lives, whether it be elementary school, certainly throughout high school, and on into the choices they make regarding post-secondary education. And when I say all students, I am absolutely including, of course, students who partake in special education. In Ontario, special education is made up of 12 exceptionalities. Here I have them listed alphabetically. All of these exceptionalities cause learning difficulties, but only one of them carries the actual name of learning disability. And this term, learning disability, often gets used in a very general way. But in the eyes of our Ministry of Education, it has very specific criteria for a student to qualify to be part of this identification. And I will highlight some of that criteria shortly. But first, let's look at some of the numbers from the Ministry of Ed and see what they tell us. These statistics illustrate the prevalence of students in each of these 12 exceptionalities. They are listed in descending order, beginning with the most dominant group. Quite obviously in this study, 43.3% of exceptional students in Ontario were identified as having a learning disability. And that is equal to almost all of the other exceptionalities combined. This very high percentage warrants that we all have a very strong understanding of what a learning disability is and what it is not. So I will take a few moments and give you some very concise facts around what is it to have a learning disability. First and foremost, it is an invisible disability. There are no physical characteristics associated with it. You cannot look at anyone and tell they have a learning disability, but you can notice some things. And what you'll notice certainly quite early on with young students is that they are struggling at school. And there's often mixed messages associated with their levels of success at school. An example would be, in 80% of the time, children will be very strong verbally, but they have difficulty expressing language in a written or in a reading format. Now, the hope is that before too long, a parent or a teacher will absolutely want to explore this, and an assessment is conducted. And what does it establish? That yes, this child is having difficulty, but they are smart. They have average to above average intelligence. What is at play here, and what we need to understand, is that their brains simply process information differently. These are not defective brains in any way. They are simply going to manage information in a different way than your mainstream learner. Now, in a classroom, what do we ask students to do? All day long, we require of them to process huge amounts of information. So challenges with processing matches then up with difficulties with processing subject material. Let's go to the good. These students have great abilities. They come to you with strengths. They come to you with gifts. And yet they may find it very difficult to prove to you how smart they are on paper. And often what they're really good does not show up in what is being tested, what is being measured and supposed to be representing their intelligence. This identification is lifelong. This is the way their brains arrive. We are not looking for a cure. We do not want to change these brains. What we want to do is understand them. How is it that they learn? Because clearly they learn. So we need to teach them based on the way that they learn. We acknowledge there is a huge range within this identification, from mild to severe. Certainly the more severe it is, the more areas of the curriculum it's going to impact on. Interesting fact, it's very common. 1 in 10 Canadians has a learning disability. Let's bring it into our province, just in Ontario. They tell us that every year babies are arriving, apparently 140,000 of them every year. While in and amongst those are children with learning disabilities. Upwards around 14,000 of these brains are uniquely wonderful. They have a way of processing information that is different than others. And that's because of the hereditary factor, which is absolutely evident here. Just as you inherit the color of your eyes, the color of your hair from your parents, perhaps from your grandparents, so do we inherit the inclination of the way our brains process information. Now, this is a fact that I can relate to because I have a learning disability. I also have 4 amazing adult children, 3 of which are sons. All 3 have a learning disability. Now, school was not an easy experience for any of them, but along the way we figured out an awful lot of things. We figured out what they needed, we figured out what they needed to do, and now they all have fabulous jobs that draw on their strengths and allow them to do meaningful and rewarding work. There are an awful lot of people in history that have done meaningful and rewarding work based on the way that their brains work. I don't know that these folks in history ever had any formal assessments, but history does tell us that school was not a place where they could express their genius, and they struggled in school. Let's bring it into the present day. Some pretty mainstream folks here, recognizable people, all whose brains process information differently, but they make a difference because of their difference. And they often speak very, very publicly about what it was like for them. And the main message is always that early struggles are not a prophecy of doom. Get what you need, get connected, work with your teachers, all kinds of common language there. But I submit to you that it's probably pretty easy for them to do that now as an adult. It's easier once you've been through it and you're on the other side of it to divulge what it was like. But a young student does not have that luxury. They are in it. They don't have the benefit of successes and looking back and saying, gee, I've come through that. They also don't have the self-awareness to be able to project into their future. This cartoon's tagline actually would have that. Can't we just see this is a humorous anecdote, one which, when I'm rich and famous, we can just look back upon and laugh? This won't mean anything in 10, 15 years. No, they don't have that self-awareness. But we as educators do, and that also is part of our jobs. We need to hold that awareness for them in order to establish for them successes, ensure that they get that experience.